This is a great one. We're going to look at a fluids problem here. This is the intergalactic problem set numero 8. That's a 5. 8. If we take a look at it, we're looking at this problem here with buoyant forces. A boat is carrying a large chunk of steel. That's a weird way of saying that. A boat carrying a large chunk of steel is floating in a lake. So you got a boat, big chunk of steel in it, it's floating in a lake. You then take the chunk, lift it up, and then you throw it overboard, and it sinks to the bottom of the lake. I'd like to explain in detail what happens to the water level in the lake with respect to the shore. So does our water level in the lake as we throw this steel into it, does it go up? Does it go down? Does it stay the same and nobody cares? Other than that, the fact that there's steel in the lake now. So what's going on there? This problem is a little non-intuitive the first time you do it. The reason being is you're so used to standing outside of like a bathtub or a cup, and when you throw something into the thing filled with water, the water level goes up because you're displacing some amount of fluid. And we're still using that idea of displacing here, but it's a little subtle in how it's working. What we have to recognize is in the beginning, when you have your lake and you are in it with your boat, and in that boat is a chunk of steel. You and the steel and whatnot in the boat are pushing down on the lake with the weight of the boat plus the weight of the steel. And since you're floating, that means the lake is providing you with a buoyant force equal to the weight of the boat plus the weight of the steel. So the entire steel's weight is being supported here. Okay? And if we think about weight, we can convert that to a mass times a gravity, and we know mass can be given with a density and a volume. So we have some volume kicked there of water. And if you think about that, if we're floating this iron in the boat, or the steel in the boat, we have to displace a lot of water in order to cause that to float. Because the steel is very dense, it's much denser than water. We need to displace more volume of water than the volume of the steel itself in order to get it to float. If, however, and this is where things get kind of changed up. If, however, we take our lake, and here's our boat, and we toss the steel rod into the bottom. Now, the only thing that we have here is the weight of the boat. And that means the only buoyant force we have is the buoyant force of the boat. So if we kind of look at this, okay, we don't care about the buoyant force of the boat. And we don't care about the weight of the boat anymore, okay? Because those values are equal in both setups here. The question becomes, is this weight of steel in terms of water greater than what this steel did down here? Now down here, this steel only displaced its volume in water. And since its volume in water is much less than the weight of the water that the steel could have displaced to float, this lake level is actually going to do something that you didn't expect it to. Because you have actually given the lake less to support, less to displace, your lake level goes down here whenever you toss the steel in. Yes, you tossed it into the lake, but the lake doesn't have to displace as much anymore. The lake only has to displace whatever it can for that actual volume of the steel. Whenever it was in the boat, not only was it displacing the volume of the steel, but it needed more than that because it needed to displace the entire steel's weight. So your lake actually goes down whenever you toss that steel into it. It's kind of a weird effect because it's unintuitive. Normally when we toss stuff into something, we see the water level rise, but in this case, the water cannot support the steel in and of itself, so it just sinks. We only get a volume displaced, where here the volume displaced is much, much greater. I guess another way you can kind of think of that is the density of steel times the volume of the steel times gravity here. This is equal to the weight of the steel, because this is m times g. If I needed this weight of the steel to equal the weight of some amount of water, well, that would be the density of water times the volume of water times g. If we kind of just look at this mathematically, the g's go away. Our density, well, if we go this in grams per centimeter cubed, the density of water is 1, so I don't really care about it either. And that means that the volume of water I had to displace when I was holding it up was equal to the volume of the steel times the density of steel. And since that steel density is greater than 1, we have to displace way more water when we're floating it than we do when we just sink it. So that's why whenever we actually take it and sink it down, our lake's going down there. So both from a logical perspective and from a mathematical perspective, that's what we see there. So kind of an interesting problem. Definitely unintuitive first time you do it, but pretty cool nonetheless. And with that, we're fin.